Hi, welcome back to Rocket Talk. In this episode, I'm going to talk about the rocket that launched ENVISAT, Rosetta, a part of the Galileo constellation, and most recently sent the Bepi-Colombo mission on its way to Mercury. You all know what rocket I'm talking about. It's the European workhorse, the Ariane 5 rocket. The Ariane 5 is the largest and heaviest rocket in the European family of launchers. This rocket has 5 variants: G, G+, GS, ECA and ES. Only the ECA variant is currently operational and all other variants have been retired. A 6th version was planned called Ariane 5 ME, but this version was cancelled in favor of development of the Ariane 6. Ariane 5 succeeded Ariane 4 but was not derived from it directly, as Ariane 5 was developed from scratch. This was in contrast to the Ariane 4, which was directly derived from the Ariane 1, 2 and 3. ESA originally designed Ariane 5 to launch the Hermes spaceplane and thus intended it to be human-rated from the beginning. The development of the Ariane 5 started in 1987 and it launched for the first time in 1996. All 5 versions have the same generic structure: 2 solid boosters attached to the cryogenic core stage and on top a second stage. The fairing has 3 sizes: short, medium and long. Like on the Ariane 4, 2 satellites can be launched using a SILDA carrier, Système de Lancement Double Ariane, Ariane Double Launch System. 3 main satellites are possible depending on the size using Speltra, Structure Portueuse Externe Lancement Triple Ariane, Ariane Triple Launch External Carrier Structure. Up to 8 secondary payloads, usually small experiment packages or mini-satellites, can be carried with ASAP, Ariane Structure for Auxiliary Payloads. Ariane 5's cryogenic main stage is called the EPC after the French D'étage Principal Cryotechnique, or cryogenic main stage. It consists of a large tank 30.5 meters high with 2 compartments, one for liquid oxygen and one for liquid hydrogen, and was powered by a Vulcain 1 engine at the base for the Ariane G, G+, and GS, with a vacuum thrust of 1015 kilonewtons, and it was powered by a Vulcain 2 for the Ariane ECA and ES, producing about 1390 kilonewtons of thrust. The EPC for the G, G+, and GS weighed about 170.5 tons and contained 158 tons of propellant. The EPC for the ECA and ES weighs 184 tons and it contains 170 tons of fuel. After the cryogenic main stage runs out of fuel, it re-enters the atmosphere for an ocean splashdown 500 kilometers off the coast of Côte d'Ivoire. The Vulcain engine on the bottom of the EPC was exclusively designed for the Ariane 5 and is now being redesigned for use on the new Ariane 6 rocket. This engine is a gas generator cycle regeneratively cooled engine. Gas generator means that a bit of fuel and oxidizer is burned in a separate chamber called the preburner. The hot exhaust of the preburner is fed into the turbo part of the turbopumps, one for the liquid oxygen and one for the liquid hydrogen. For the Vulcain 1, the exhaust gas of the turbopumps was ducted away by 2 pipes next to the engine. For the Vulcain 2, however, the hot gas is used for something called film cooling. After it leaves the turbopumps, 2 pipes inject it into a big ring around the engine. They made the nozzle of the Vulcain 2 larger to gain more thrust and therefore needed more cooling. This was provided by letting the relatively cold turbo exhaust flow along the wall of the nozzle in combination with a small bit of hydrogen. By doing this, the engine became also a tiny bit more efficient compared to its predecessor. Regeneratively cooled means that the walls of the combustion chamber and the nozzle are made of tubes. The cold hydrogen flows through these tubes to prevent the combustion chamber and nozzle from melting. For the Vulcain 1, the whole nozzle was regeneratively cooled, and for the Vulcain 2, only the top part of the nozzle. Attached to the core stage are 2 solid rocket boosters. These are called SRBs or EAPs from the French Étage d'accélération à poudre. They are 31 meters high and 3 meters in diameter. For the G and G+, they weigh about 37 tons empty and 277 tons fully fueled. delivering a thrust of about 6,650 kilonewtons each. For the GS, ECA, and ES, they weigh 33 tons empty and 273 tons when fully fueled. Together, they provide about 92% of the thrust at liftoff. They are fueled by a mix of ammonium perchlorate, aluminium fuel, and HTPB. Each booster consists of a steel casing enclosing 3 segments filled with propellant and joined together. The top segment is loaded with propellant at the Colleferro plant in Italy, while the middle and bottom segments are filled in the solid propellant production plant at the spaceport. Although the casings are only 8 mm thick, they can resist pressures of up to 64 bars. The SRBs are usually allowed to sink to the bottom of the ocean, but, like the Space Shuttle solid rocket boosters, they can be recovered with parachutes, and this has occasionally been done for post-flight analysis. Unlike the Space Shuttle SRBs, Ariane 5 boosters are not reused. The second stage for the G, G+, GS, and ES was called the EPS for the French Étage à hypergoldes stockables, or storable propellant stage, and it used the hypergolic propellants monomethyl hydrazine and nitrogen tetroxide. The stages were propelled by the ACES engine that produced 27 kilonewtons of thrust. The second stage for ECA is called the ECA-A for the French Étage supérieur cryotechnique A, or cryogenic upper stage, and it uses liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen. The stage is powered by the HM7B engine. This engine was used as an upper stage engine in the Ariane 2, 3, and 4 rockets. The launch site of the Ariane 5 is located in French Guiana, next to the Vega launch pad. The launch pad is very close to the equator. This allows the rocket to carry a little bit more payload, and it also saves the payload's fuel and time getting into their final orbit. This results in smaller satellites or satellites that have a longer lifespan compared to satellites launched from the US. The original Ariane 5 was called Ariane 5G, G for generic, and it had launch pads of 737 tons. Its payload capacity to geostationary transfer orbit was 6,900 kilograms for a single satellite and 6,100 kilograms for a dual launch. Ariane 5's first test flight on the 4th of June 1996 failed, with the rocket self-destructing 37 seconds after launch because of a malfunction in the control software. A part of the software, aligning the inertial reference unit, converted a 64-bit number into a 16-bit number. This was part of the old flight software of the Ariane 4. The program was supposed to shut down 40 seconds after launch. The flight controllers knew that if the 64-bit number became too big, the 16-bit number would become negative. They didn't think this would be an issue because it wasn't on the Ariane 4. They clearly underestimated the power of the Ariane 5. After the rocket cleared the pad, the rocket rose way faster than the Ariane 4. After 37 seconds, the rocket's speed was so big that the 16-bit number became negative. This led to the rocket thinking it was 90 degrees off course. The rocket immediately corrected for this, and the fairing disintegrated due to aerodynamic loads, and the rocket was destroyed by range safety. The Ariane 5G Plus was an improved version of the G. This version had an improved EPS second stage with 300 kilograms more fuel, increasing the payload capability to GTO 7,100 kilograms for a single payload or 6,300 kilograms for two. It flew 3 times in 2004 with no failures. The Ariane 5 ECA was a major improvement over the G and G+. The rocket uses an improved Vulcan 2 first stage engine with a longer, more efficient nozzle, and with a more efficient flow cycle and denser propellant ratio. The newer ratio required length modification to the first stage tanks. The EPS second stage was replaced by the ESCA. The ESCA also used the liquid oxygen tank and lower structure from the Ariane 4's third stage, mated to a new liquid hydrogen tank. Additionally, the EAP booster casings were lightened with new welds and carried more propellant. The Ariane 5 ECA has a GTO launch capability of 9,100 kilograms for dual payloads or 9,600 kilograms for a single payload, although the record for mass to GTO is 10,865 kilograms. Its first flight ended in disaster. The new Vulcan 2 engine had a new design of its cooling tubes, but during ascent some of these tubes cracked. This was observed as a drop in pressure of the coolant dump. As I already mentioned, the Vulcan is a regeneratively cooled rocket engine. This means that some part of the hydrogen flows through the tubes of the nozzle and cools down the nozzle. These cracks led to a structural breakdown of the engine's nozzle around 170 seconds into flight. The structural breakdown made the engine lose thrust and the rocket started falling back down, and eventually the rocket was destroyed by range safety. At the time of the failure of the first Ariane ECA in 2002, all Ariane 5 launchers in production were ECA versions, but after the failure of the ECA version, the rockets were grounded. As a solution, some of the ECA cores were modified to use the original Vulcan engine and tank volumes while the failure was investigated. These vehicles were designated Ariane 5 GS. The GS used the improved EAP's boosters from the ECA variant and the improved EPS from the G Plus variant, but the increased mass of the modified ECA core and compared to the G and G Plus core resulted in a slightly reduced payload capacity. Ariane 5 GS could carry a single payload of up to 6,600 kilograms or a dual payload of 5,800 kilograms to GTO. Ariane 5 GS flew 6 times from 2005 to 2009 with no failures. The Ariane 5 ES was designed to launch the ATV into low Earth orbit. The rocket used the boosters and core stage from the ECA and the EPS from the G Plus and GS variants. The ES was eventually configured to launch 4 Galileo satellites directly into their operational orbit. The EPS stage was only half filled for the ATV missions and was fully fueled for the Galileo missions. The rocket flew 5 times with an ATV and 3 times with 4 Galileo satellites. And now it's time for Rocket Countdown Rundown. I chose the launch sequence of the ECA version because this is the only active version. The exact times of booster separation, main stage separation, and second stage ignition and shutdown are mission specific, and between each mission, those events differ by a few seconds. The countdown sequence, however, is the same for all missions. At T-minus 11 hours and 43 minutes, the countdown is initiated. All launch controllers take their seat in the control rooms. At T-minus 10 hours and 23 minutes, the Ariane 5 rocket is powered on. At T-minus 9 hours and 30 minutes, the rocket electrical systems are checked. At T-minus 7 hours and 30 minutes, the rocket is set into its defueling configuration. This means that all valves are in the correct position for fueling. At T-minus 6 hours, pad personnel start finishing their tasks and get ready to leave the launch pad. Also at T-minus 6 hours, the flight software is loaded into the rocket. The computer on board cancels the last flight program. Also at T-minus 6 hours, the inertial guidance system is aligned and checked. At T-minus 5 hours, the launch pad is evacuated. Also at T-minus 5 hours, the attitude control system is pressurized. At T-minus 4 hours and 50 minutes, the liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen tanks on the ground are pressurized in preparation for rocket fueling. At T-minus 4 hours and 30 minutes, the propellant lines running from the ground to the rocket are chilled in preparation for fueling. At T-minus 4 hours and 23 minutes, the fueling of the first stage starts. At T-minus 3 hours and 43 minutes, the fueling of the second stage starts. At T-minus 3 hours and 33 minutes, the main Vulcan engine is chilled down. The pre-valves are open to allow supercooled liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen to flow into the turbopumps to chill it in preparation for launch. The liquid hydrogen is also allowed to flow into the tubes of the nozzle. This is done to ensure there's no cavitation on startup of the engine, which could cause a catastrophic failure. At T-minus 2 hours, the propellant topping sequence starts. The fuel levels in both stages are now at flight level, but because the cryogenic fuels keep boiling and turning into gas, the fuel that has boiled off needs to be replenished to keep the fuel levels at the proper height. At T-minus 1 hour and 50 minutes, telemetry tracking command system checkouts take place. At T-minus 30 minutes, the rocket is prepared for the synchronized sequence. At T-minus 10 minutes, the go, no-go for the launch takes place. The launch director pulls everyone ahead of the synchronized sequence. At T-minus 8 minutes, the satellites switch from external power to internal power. At T-minus 7 minutes is the countdown hold and recycle point. Should anything come up in the synchronized sequence, the launch team halts the countdown and moves the rocket back into the T-minus 7 minutes configuration. This is also the point at which the synchronized sequence starts. This means that the control of the rocket is handed over from the ground to the rocket computers. At T-minus 6 minutes and 30 seconds, the propellant topping is terminated for the first stage. At T-minus 6 minutes, the rocket igniters are armed. Also at T-minus 6 minutes, the loading of the helium on the first stage is terminated. At T-minus 4 minutes, the first stage propellant tank is pressurized and the connection with the launch pad is also purged. Also at this point, the liquid oxygen topping is terminated for the second stage and the second stage liquid oxygen tank is pressurized. At T-minus 3 minutes and 40 seconds, the liquid hydrogen topping on the second stage is terminated. At T-minus 3 minutes and 30 seconds, the exact launch time is calculated. At T-minus 3 minutes and 10 seconds, the second stage liquid hydrogen tank is pressurized. At T-minus 3 minutes, the final T0 time is loaded onto the onboard computers. At T-minus 2 minutes and 30 seconds, the heating of the batteries on the rocket and igniters of the Vulcan engine is terminated. At T-minus 2 minutes, the Vulcan 2 bleeder valves are opened and chill-down valves are closed. At T-minus 1 minute 50 seconds, the pre-deflection of the HMB-7 engine starts. This is also referred to as engine wiggle, to test if the thrust vector control to steer the rocket is working correctly. At T-minus 1 minute and 5 seconds, the rocket is transitioned to internal power. At T-minus 37 seconds, the ignition sequence starts with the activation of the onboard recorder and the arming of the pyrotechnic lines on the flight termination system. At T-minus 22 seconds, the first stage attitude control system is enabled. At T-minus 16.5 seconds, the POGO system is pressurized. Also at T-minus 16.5 seconds, the fairing ventilation is terminated. At T-minus 12 seconds, the sound suppression water system is activated. At T-minus 6 seconds, the cryogenic umbilicals are retracted. At the same point, the flares to burn off the excess hydrogen are ignited. At T-minus 5.5 seconds, the control is handed over to the onboard computer. At T-minus 3 seconds, the guidance system transitions to flight mode and the computer status is checked. At this time, the helium pressurization system, to keep the fuel tanks pressurized as the fuel drains out of them, is also activated. At T-minus 2.5 seconds, the thrust vector control system on the second stage is verified and functions as expected. At T-minus 2 seconds, the launch pad water system is activated. At T-minus 0, the Vulcan 2 main engine is ignited. The Vulcan ignites using 3 small pyrotechnic devices. These devices are basically small rocket engines. The first of the 3 spools up the turbopumps, the second one ignites the preburner, and the third one ignites the fuel in the main combustion chamber. At T plus 6.9 seconds, the Vulcan checkout ends. If this is okay, the rocket proceeds to igniting the solid rocket boosters at 7.5 seconds. At T plus 7.3 seconds, the rocket lifts off. At 12 seconds, it does a pitch maneuver, and at 17 seconds, it does a roll maneuver. At 22 seconds, the pitch maneuver is complete, and at 32 seconds, the roll maneuver is complete. The rocket goes past the speed of sound at 49 seconds. At 1 minute and 8 seconds, it hits maximum pressure. At 2 minutes and 31 seconds, the SRB burns out and are jettisoned. At 3 minutes and 28 seconds, the payload fairing is jettisoned. At T plus 8 minutes and 53 seconds, the core stage shuts down. 2 seconds later, it separates, and at 9 minutes and 3 seconds, the second stage ignites. At T plus 25 minutes and 8 seconds after having burned for 16 minutes, the second stage shuts down. A few seconds later, it reorients for satellite separation. At about 27 minutes, the first satellite is separated, followed by the Silda separation a few minutes later. A few minutes after the Silda has been separated, the second satellite is separated. After both satellites are separated from the upper stage, and the distance between the satellites and the upper stage is large enough, the upper stage reorients and performs a spin-up maneuver for stability. Once the spin-up maneuver has been completed, the remaining fuel in the tanks is vented and the tanks are depressurized. After the tanks are depressurized, the batteries are drained and disconnected. After this is complete, the flight computer shuts down and the stage turns into a big piece of space debris. The Ariane 5 is expected to fly until 2022, and after that the Ariane 6 will take over its role as the European heavy lifter. That's it for the Ariane 5. If you like this, please consider supporting me on Patreon. As always, like, subscribe and share this video. Leave your suggestions for the next episode in the comments. Thanks for watching. This is Arcanite signing off. See you in the next episode of Rocket Talk.